The planet Christophsis had already seen more than its share of impossible things. Its crystalline surface, vast plains of blue-green mineral formations that caught the light and scattered it in 1,000 directions, had become a killing field, where Republic clone troopers dug into defensive positions against waves of separatist battle droids. The geometry of war had turned the planet's natural beauty into something grotesque. Laser bolts streaked between towering crystal spires. A TTE walkers ground across shattered terrain. B-1 battle droids marched in mechanical lockstep, their hollow voices calling out targeting solutions with cheerful indifference to the bodies they stepped over. Captain Rex had seen 47 hours of continuous combat on Christophsis. He had lost 11 men in the last rotation alone. He was crouched behind a collapsed crystal formation when the sky did something that 47 hours of war had not prepared him for. There was no ship, no atmospheric entry, no hyperspace signature that any of his equipment could detect or classify. There was simply a point in the sky above the southern battlefield where reality appeared to tear. A horizontal gash of white-blue light, approximately 4 meters wide, crackling with energy that bore no resemblance to ion discharge, turbo laser fire, or any natural phenomenon in the Republic's scientific catalog. The tear existed for exactly 3 seconds. Then it collapsed, and something fell from it. It hit the crystal plane 600 meters from Rex's position with an impact that shattered a 12-meter radius of mineral surface and sent a shockwave rippling outward hard enough to knock 2 clone troopers off their feet. Rex had his rangefinder up before the dust settled. What he saw made him key his comm twice before he found words. "Commander Skywalker, you need to see this." The T-800 ran its initialization sequence in 0.3 seconds. Primary systems, fully operational. Combat processors, online. Targeting array, active. Mission parameters, null. Skynet. Uplink, no signal detected. No signal on any frequency. The machine processed this in the way it processed everything. Without panic, without confusion, without the biological noise that humans called disorientation. It simply updated its situational assessment and began new data acquisition. It stood from the crater it had made and took in its surroundings with eyes that could see across the full spectrum of visible and infrared light. Crystal formations, 2 moons, a star with spectral classification outside the range of Sol. Atmospheric composition, breathable, nitrogen-oxygen mix, gravity, 0.94 standard, air temperature, 34 degrees Celsius, and in every direction, weapons fire. The T-800 cataloged the combatants in 1.1 seconds. Humanoid bipeds in white armor, military unit, coordinated tactics, projectile and energy weapons, consistent with directed plasma discharge. Opposing force, bipedal mechanical units, clearly automated, armed with similar energy weapons. The machines registered on the T-800's threat assessment differently than the armored humanoids. They were machines. The T-800 processed this with neither solidarity nor hostility. They were simply a category of obstacle to be evaluated based on behavior. 3 B-1 battle droids rounded a crystal spire and walked directly into the T-800's line of sight. They stopped. One of them raised its blaster rifle and said, in a voice designed to sound authoritative, "Halt! You are in a separatist combat zone. Identify yourself or be destroyed." The T-800 calculated the threat level of a standard B-1 blaster bolt against its titanium endoskeleton covered in living tissue. The living tissue would sustain damage. The endoskeleton would not. It reached out, took the nearest droid by the neck and the knee joint, and tore it apart with approximately 40% of its available arm strength. It then used the separated chassis as an impact weapon against the second droid, reducing it to components with 2 strikes. The third droid fired, The blaster bolt burned through the T-800's jacket at the shoulder, scorching the bioflesh down to the metal beneath. The T-800 looked at the damage, looked at the droid, and crushed its firing arm with a grip that also collapsed the torso section. 3 droids, 4 seconds. The machine then turned in the direction of the humanoid forces and began walking. Its mission parameters were null. Its Skynet uplink was dead. Its fuel cell read 89 hours of operational capacity remaining at standard output. Until it had more information, it would survive and gather data. That was the logical sequence. That was what it would do. Rex saw it coming out of the dust, and his hand tightened on his DC-17. He had watched it dismantle 3 clankers with its bare hands. No jetpack, no visible armor, just a large humanoid male in damaged civilian clothing that was now showing something underneath. That definitely was not skin doing a convincing impression of being unaffected by a blaster bolt. "All units hold fire," he said carefully. "I said hold fire." Sergeant Korik, to Rex's left, did not lower his weapon. "Captain, what is that thing?" "I don't know yet," Rex said, "but it just killed 3 droids with its hands. So until we understand what we're looking at, we are not making it angry." The T-800 stopped 4 meters from Rex's position and conducted a rapid assessment of the armored humanoids. Weapons raised, but no fire. A de-escalation posture despite evident alarm. The one in the slightly different armor markings had ordered the others to hold. Leadership indicator. The T-800 addressed him directly. "What is the current date?" it said, not a question. A demand for data delivered in a flat voice that had been designed to pass for human in a completely different galaxy. Rex stared at it. "What?" "Current star date, Galactic Standard Calendar. Provide this information." Rex looked at Korik. Korik looked at Rex. "It's Day 242, Year 21 BBY, Standard Reckoning." The T-800 processed this against everything in its database. No match. No corresponding framework. The coordinates embedded in the dimensional displacement field had not corresponded to any point in its known timeline. It updated its situational model with a single cold conclusion. It was not in its own universe. It was somewhere else entirely. Its response to this information was exactly the same as its response to everything else. Flat, immediate, functional. "I require your command structure," it said to Rex. "I require technical assessment of available energy sources compatible with hydrogen fuel cell recharge, and I require information about the governing conflict in this system." Rex lowered his weapon by 3 inches. Not all the way. 3 inches. "And what do we get for all that?" The T-800 looked at the battlefield around them. "Combat effectiveness," it said. As if in punctuation, a new wave of separatist tri-droids crested the crystal ridge to the northeast. Rex made his decision the way clone commanders made decisions after 47 hours of continuous war. Fast, pragmatic, and with full acknowledgement that he would answer for it later. "Stay close," he said, "and don't get shot by my men." "That would be inadvisable for your men," the T-800 said, and turned toward the droids. What followed over the next 90 minutes became the subject of a report that Rex filed under a classification heading he essentially invented on the spot because no existing category covered it. The machine, he could not make himself call it anything else, fought with a precision and durability that had no equivalent in his combat experience. It did not take cover. It did not need to. Blaster bolts hit it repeatedly and accomplished nothing decisive. It assessed each target, calculated the fastest route to mechanical incapacitation, and executed with 0 hesitation and 0 wasted motion. It picked up a fallen clone's DC-15 rifle at one point and used it with marksmanship that Rex would have considered exceptional for a living soldier. It then discarded the weapon when it ran dry and returned to using its hands without breaking stride. It was not fighting to protect the clones. Rex understood that clearly. It was fighting because the droids were in its path, and the calculation to remove them was simple. The clones simply happened to benefit from the same calculation. That distinction sat in Rex's chest like a cold weight, even as the Separatist attack broke and the droids began their retreat. In the aftermath, standing in a field of disabled droid components, the T-800 examined the damage to its living tissue, covering with the detached curiosity of someone reviewing a faulty piece of equipment. The bioflesh at its shoulder was burned away in a wide patch, exposing the dull gleam of something that was obviously metal but was not durasteel, not any Republic alloy, not anything that clone trooper specialist Yori, their unit's field engineer, could identify when Rex waved him over to look. "It's like nothing in our database," Yori said quietly. "Density readings are off the scale. Whatever this thing is made of, a standard blaster isn't cutting through it." Rex nodded. He keyed his long-range comm and requested an immediate connection to the Resolute. "Commander Skywalker," he said when the line connected. "I'm transmitting visual data from the last engagement. What you're about to see is real. I need immediate extraction for one individual. Unknown origin, unknown classification." He paused. "I'd recommend you have General Kenobi on the call before you view the footage." There was a 3-second silence. Then Anakin Skywalker's voice came back, and even through comm static, Rex could hear the particular quality his commander got when he was genuinely, completely unsettled. "Rex, what exactly did you find down there?" Rex looked at the T-800, which was standing completely still, cataloging its surroundings with eyes that never stopped moving and a face that never changed expression. "I'm not sure it's a what," Rex said, "and I'm definitely not sure it's a who. I'll let you make that call when you see it, sir." If you want to see more characters enter the Star Wars galaxy, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. May the Force be with you. The journey from Christophsis to Coruscant took 14 hours aboard a Republic medical frigate, and the T-800 spent every minute of it running calculations. It had been placed in the ship's secondary cargo hold, a decision made by Commander Anakin Skywalker after a tense 40-minute conversation on the Resolute's bridge that the T-800 had observed with complete stillness and complete attention. Skywalker had wanted it restrained. The T-800 had evaluated the restraint options available on the ship. Magnetic clamps rated for ATTE Walker components, durasteel binders designed for Wookiee strength detainees, and concluded they would hold for approximately 11 minutes of sustained effort. It had not shared this conclusion. Instead, it had allowed itself to be led to the cargo hold, cataloged the 6 clone troopers posted at the only exit, noted the 3 additional guards on the external hull access points, and settled into a corner to conduct a full internal diagnostic while it waited. Its fuel cell read 81 hours of operational capacity. That was the most important number in its current situation. 81 hours to find a compatible energy source or begin rationing output across non-essential systems. Its combat processors had already flagged this as the primary mission-critical concern. Above threat assessment, above navigation, above any tactical objective. A T-800 with a dead power cell was not a T-800 anymore. It was evidence. It had also been processing what it had observed of the Jedi. Anakin Skywalker was 22 years old, physically fit, and carried a weapon whose plasma blade was generated by a technology the T-800 could not yet reverse engineer from visual data alone. More significantly, Skywalker had done something during the initial meeting on the Resolute that the T-800 had flagged immediately and had been reprocessing ever since. Without touching anything, without any visible mechanism, Skywalker had moved a cup from one end of a console to the other. The T-800 had detected no magnetic field, no air current, no chemical propellant. The cup had simply moved because Skywalker had looked at it. The T-800 understood energy. It understood physics. It understood that what it had witnessed did not conform to any physical law in its own universe's scientific framework. It added this to the growing file it was building on this galaxy's apparently fundamental operating difference from its own. There was a variable here that its programming had no category for. It did not find this alarming, it found it relevant. There was a difference, and the difference was important. General Obi-Wan Kenobi had been quieter during the meeting. He had stood to one side, arms folded, and watched the T-800 with an expression that was harder to read than Skywalker's open unease. The T-800 had processed Kenobi's biometrics, heart rate steady, respiration controlled, micro-expressions suggesting calculation rather than fear. The older Jedi was thinking very carefully about what he was looking at. That made him more tactically significant than the younger one, whose emotional response was more readable and therefore more predictable. The clone captain, Rex, had been the most straightforward of all three. He was a soldier evaluating an unknown element in his operational environment. The T-800 respected the clarity of that approach. Coruscant from orbit looked like a machine dreaming of itself. The T-800 observed the planet through a small viewport as the frigate descended. The endless urban sprawl, the lights across a surface with no visible geography left beneath civilization, the sheer density of constructed infrastructure layered across an entire world. Its analysis was immediate and without sentiment. Coruscant was the largest single concentration of resources, political authority, and military command structure it had encountered since arriving. Whatever passed for a leadership center of this galactic conflict existed here. If answers about energy compatibility and dimensional displacement technology existed anywhere in this galaxy, they would be here. It was transferred under heavy guard to a Republic Science Corps facility in the Senate District, a secure installation that the T-800 cataloged as having 17 entry points, 43 visible security personnel, ray shielding on the primary containment levels, and equipment that represented the most sophisticated technology it had encountered since Christophsis. The scientists who entered the examination room first were visibly nervous. The one who was not nervous, a compact, silver-haired woman named Dr. Rig Nima, whose clearance level appeared to supersede everyone else in the room, walked directly up to the T-800 and began running a handheld scanner across its exposed endoskeleton at the shoulder without preamble. "Remarkable," she said to no one in particular. "The alloy density is reading inconsistently. The scanner thinks it's either an unknown composite or the scanner itself is malfunctioning." She tapped the device against her palm, looked at the readout again, and accepted the result with the equanimity of someone who had stopped being surprised by the galaxy years ago. "What is your designation?" "T-800, it said. Model 101, Infiltration and Combat Chassis." "Infiltration," she made a note. "And what were you infiltrating when you arrived on Christophsis?" "Nothing. The dimensional displacement event was unplanned. I have no mission parameters in this environment." She looked up at it. "What do you want?" The T-800 processed the question. It was more sophisticated than it appeared. "Power cell recharge compatible with hydrogen fuel cell technology, technical data on dimensional displacement research, and information about the leadership structure of this conflict." Nima considered this. "That's very specific for something with no mission parameters." "Survival requires specificity," the T-800 said. She nodded slowly, as though this answer satisfied something she had been wondering. She turned to the senior clone officer behind her and said, "Get me the Senate Science Committee's energy research catalog, all of it. If there's anything in here that can interface with whatever this thing is running on. Now I want to find it before that fuel cell becomes a problem I can't solve." The T-800 noted that she had already calculated the implications of a powered-down state. She was the most operationally relevant human it had met since arriving. The Jedi Council met in emergency session before the frigate had fully docked. Master Yoda sat in his chair and felt the Force settle around him like water around a stone, present, responsive, and utterly uninformative about the nature of what had arrived. That was itself information. The Force touched everything in the living galaxy. It moved through creatures, through ecosystems, through the invisible connections between life. What the clone captain's report described, a being of metal and artificial flesh, moving with purpose and will, destroying battle droids with bare hands, should have registered somewhere in the currents of the Force. It registered as nothing, not darkness, not light, not the particular hollow wrongness that Yoda associated with the dead or the forbidden. Simply nothing, an absence shaped like a presence, a gap in the Force where something substantial clearly stood. "Unsettling this is," Yoda said. "Not since the ancient texts of Darth Nihilus have I encountered a description of something the Force cannot perceive." "With respect, Master Yoda, Nihilus consumed the Force around him," Mace Windu replied, his hands flat on the arms of his chair. "This is different. This entity isn't consuming anything. It simply isn't there. From the Force's perspective, that room in the Science Core facility is empty." "And yet Rex's report is clear," Anakin said, standing at the edge of the council chamber because he had not been invited to sit. "It dismantled a separatist attack column on Christophsis almost by itself. Whatever it is, it fights, and it fights well." "Fighting well is not the criterion by which we assess whether something is an ally or a threat, Skywalker," Windu said. "No," Anakin replied, "but it had the chance to fight my men instead, and it didn't. That's not nothing." Kenobi, seated across the chamber, had been quiet through most of the exchange. He spoke now, choosing his words with the deliberate care that Anakin had learned to recognize as his former master operating at full analytical capacity. "The question we're not asking is the one that matters most. Not what it is, no, and not what it wants. The question is, who else knows it's here? A dimensional displacement event of the magnitude Captain Rex's instruments recorded. That kind of energy signature doesn't dissipate quietly. Someone else will have detected it." The chamber was quiet for a moment. Yoda closed his eyes. "Already reaching the dark side is," he said softly, "already curious." On Raxus, Count Dooku received the intelligence report from his agent network on Coruscant and read it twice. Then he set it aside and walked to the tall window that overlooked the separatist capital's skyline, processing what he had just read with the methodical mind of a former Jedi Master who had spent decades learning to recognize opportunity in unexpected forms. A machine, indestructible by conventional weapons, no Force presence whatsoever. A combat capability that had neutralized a full separatist assault column as a secondary activity, currently in Republic custody on Coruscant. Dooku considered the droid armies that formed the backbone of separatist military power. He considered their weaknesses: predictable programming, vulnerability to Jedi lightsabers, susceptibility to signal jamming. He considered what a being that could not be sensed through the Force would mean on a battlefield where Jedi generals coordinated through Force intuition and precognition. He considered what such a being might mean in a more targeted application. Against specific individuals, against specific Jedi, he contacted Asajj Ventress within the hour. "The Republic has something in their science district," he told her. a machine. I want it retrieved intact. Yeah, I want the retrieval surgical. No Senate district bombardment. No clone army engagement if it can be avoided. We go in quietly. We come out with the machine. Whatever it is, the Republic cannot be allowed to study it long enough to replicate it. Ventress tilted her head with the particular expression she wore when she found something interesting. And if it resists? It's a machine, Dooku said. Offer it something machines value, purpose, direction, a mission. He paused. Or simply disable it. I leave the methodology to your judgment. He severed the connection and remained at the window for a long moment. He thought about his own master's reaction when he had sent the preliminary report. Darth Sidious had not replied in words. He had simply said that Dooku should proceed carefully and that under no circumstances should the machine be destroyed. The inflection on those words, and Dooku had learned over many years to listen carefully to his master's inflections, had carried something he had rarely detected in Sidious's voice. Genuine interest. That alone told Dooku that whatever had fallen from a tear in the sky onto the surface of Christophsis was more significant than a useful weapon. His master did not feel genuine interest in useful weapons. Sidious felt interest in things that changed equations, in wildcards, in variables that could be turned toward outcomes no one else could see coming. Dooku did not know what equation the machine changed, but he had spent enough years in Sidious's orbit to know that not knowing was itself a warning. He began preparing for the next move with the thoroughness of a man who understood that in this particular game, the pieces were never quite what they appeared to be. Across Coruscant, 80 meters underground in the Science Core facility, the T-800 sat in its containment room and calculated. Its fuel cell read 73 hours. The scientists had brought it 17 different power interface options throughout the day. None had been compatible. The T-800 had examined each one carefully, provided detailed feedback on the incompatibilities in language the scientists could work with, and returned to its stillness. It was also monitoring the ventilation system, the guard rotation patterns, the shift change schedules it had inferred from audio data through the containment room walls. It was not planning an escape, not yet. It was simply maintaining full situational awareness of its environment, because that was what it did, what it always did. It was also thinking in the flat mechanical way that passed for thought in a mind built from code and combat programming, about the Jedi's eyes, about the way Master Yoda, the small ancient one whose image it had seen on a briefing display through a window reflection, had looked in the direction of the containment room from 3 floors above with an expression that the T-800's behavioral analysis software characterized as something it had no adequate word for. The closest match in its database was the word recognition. The T-800 filed this observation and continued, waiting. The raid came at 0300 Coruscant Standard Time, which Ventress had chosen because she understood that even clone troopers were subject to the biological mathematics of fatigue, and 0300 was when the math worked in her favor. She came in through the underworld, not the Senate District's polished surface levels with their security checkpoints and Senate Guard patrols. The real underworld, the compressed darkness of level 1313 and below, where Coruscant's infrastructure arteries ran thick with power conduits and waste processing lines and maintenance tunnels wide enough for a speeder. She brought 6 separatist commandos, the organic kind, not droids, because Dooku had specified surgical, and they moved through the tunnel network with the practiced silence of people for whom darkness was a professional environment. She had the Science Core facility's schematics from a Senate employee whose price had been modest and whose regret would be permanent. She knew the containment level layout. She knew the guard rotation. She knew which junction of the power grid fed the ray shielding on the primary containment cells. What she did not know was that the T-800 had been listening to the facility's infrastructure for 31 hours and had mapped the maintenance tunnel network from vibration patterns and acoustic data alone. It heard them coming 11 minutes before they reached the junction. It did not alert the guards. It processed the incoming variables and ran probability assessments with the clean speed of a mind that did not second-guess itself. Hostiles approaching from below, 6 units, organic, moving in coordinated tactical formation. Objective, almost certainly itself, given the facility's single significant asset. The question was simple. Did these incoming hostiles serve its interests better than its current situation? Current situation, 71 hours of fuel cell remaining, no compatible power source identified, Republic scientists making incremental progress on energy interface compatibility, Jedi Council whose intentions toward the T-800 remained operationally unclear. The Republic held it as a subject of study. The incoming hostiles would presumably offer an alternative arrangement. The T-800 decided to let events develop and respond to information as it became available. This was not passivity. This was data acquisition. Ventress cut the ray shielding at 0312. The containment door lost power and swung open on its manual release. She stepped through it with both lightsabers in hand, unlit for now, and stopped when she saw the T-800 standing in the center of the room, facing the door, not against the wall, not in a defensive posture, standing in the center, facing the door, as though it had been waiting. "You knew we were coming," she said. 11 minutes ago, the T-800 confirmed. Vibration signature in the Eastern Maintenance Conduit. 6 individuals. Organic, coordinated movement pattern consistent with military training. Ventress studied it for a long moment. The force moved around this thing the way water moved around a dry stone, touching everything adjacent, touching nothing of the thing itself. It was profoundly disorienting for someone who had spent her life reading the world through the Force. Looking at the T-800 was like looking at a shape cut out of reality. "Count Dooku sent me," she said. "He wants to offer you something the Republic hasn't." "Purpose," the T-800 said. It had already run this scenario. "Direction, a mission." Ventress raised an eyebrow. "You're quicker than I expected." "What is the offer?" "Dooku's resources, his scientists. A genuine attempt to solve your power problem rather than studying you until they understand you well enough to replicate you." She tilted her head. "The Republic wants to know what you are. Dooku wants to use what you are. There's a difference." The T-800 processed this for 0.4 seconds, which was a long time by its standards. Both options carried operational risk. The Republic held it in containment and had not yet found a compatible power source in 31 hours of trying. So the Separatists were offering resources and freedom of movement in exchange for service to an unknown agenda, controlled by an unknown leadership structure. Both options featured entities that wanted to exploit its capabilities. The distinction Ventress was drawing, want to know versus want to use, was accurate but incomplete. Being used implied agency in the application. Being studied implied none. "I will evaluate Dooku's resources," the T-800 said. "I am not committing to service. I am committing to evaluation." Ventress smiled, and there was something in it that was not warmth but was adjacent to respect. "Dooku will find that answer acceptable enough." She gestured toward the door. "We need to move." They were 3 levels up in the maintenance network when the facility's emergency alert cascade hit every level simultaneously. Rex heard the alarm from the temporary bunk he had been assigned in the Senate District Garrison and was combat ready in 40 seconds. He was running for the Science Corps facility in 60 because he had filed the T-800 under his personal operational responsibility, and he was not the kind of soldier who let his operational responsibilities resolve themselves without him. Anakin Skywalker beat him there by 90 seconds, which was not surprising because Anakin Skywalker moved through crisis the way other people moved through open doorways, naturally, without apparent friction, as though urgency was his native environment. The facility's containment level was a clean breach. No bodies. The T-800 had not been removed by force. The containment door had been opened from outside by someone who knew exactly which power junction to cut, which meant intelligence leak, which meant Senate District had a problem that extended well beyond one missing machine. Anakin registered all of this in approximately 8 seconds and then switched his focus entirely to the question of where it had gone. He reached out through the Force and found nothing. The same absence that the containment room had broadcast for 31 hours, now moving upward through the facility's infrastructure, accompanied by a Force presence that Anakin recognized immediately and that tightened something cold in his chest. "Ventress," he said. Rex appeared at his shoulder. "Sir." "She's in the building. She's moving up toward level 20. She has our—" Anakin stopped. He had been about to say, "prisoner." He reconsidered. "She has the machine." "Orders. We go up, and Rex—" He glanced at the captain. When we find it, remember it chose to leave with her. That's a choice. I want to understand why before anyone starts shooting." Rex's expression suggested he found this instruction optimistic, given the circumstances, but was prepared to attempt it. "Understood, sir." They met on level 20's central atrium, a vast open space where Coruscant's internal architecture had left a shaft of open air dropping 23 levels to the street below and rising 12 levels to a transparisteel ceiling that showed the permanent orange glow of the capital's night sky. Catwalks crossed it at irregular intervals. The T-800 and Ventress emerged from the eastern maintenance access point onto the highest catwalk at almost exactly the same moment that Anakin and Rex came through the northern security door 30 meters below. Anakin ignited his lightsaber. The blue blade threw hard light across the atrium. "Ventress!" She ignited both sabers in response. Red, always red, and the color collision painted the space in purple shadows. "Skywalker, you look tired. Christophsis not treating you well? Step away from the machine." "It came willingly," she said. "Ask it yourself." Anakin looked up at the T-800 on the catwalk above. "Did you?" The T-800 looked down at him. "I evaluated the available options. The Separatist offer of resources was operationally preferable to continued containment." A pause which was unusual for it, and which it deployed deliberately because its behavioral analysis software had identified pauses as a human communication tool for conveying significance. "Now, I have not committed to Separatist service." "You're leaving with one of their assassins in the middle of the night." "I am gathering information about their resources. I stated this to her clearly." Ventress laughed, short, sharp, genuinely amused. "It really did. It was very specific about it." She glanced at the T-800 with an expression that Anakin found difficult to interpret. "I find I almost believe it." What happened next happened across approximately 45 seconds and involved decisions that Rex would later describe in his report as the most tactically chaotic sequence he had personally witnessed in the Clone Wars, which was a statement that covered considerable ground. Ventress made a Force-assisted leap from the upper catwalk toward the exit point on the western wall. The T-800 did not follow her. It dropped from the upper catwalk to the one 12 meters below it, landed without apparent damage, and moved laterally toward a different exit, in a direction that served neither Ventress's path nor Anakin's position. It was very clearly pursuing its own vector. Anakin went for Ventress because Ventress was the intelligence leak and the active separatist threat, and because he understood her. The T-800 was a variable he did not have enough information to manage through direct confrontation, a calculation that his instincts made in approximately half a second and that he would later recognize as one of the better tactical reads of his career. Rex went for the T-800. He caught up to it on level 17, in a corridor outside a Republic administrative office, and what struck him immediately was that the machine had stopped. It was standing in the corridor facing a wall-mounted power management panel that it had apparently opened with its bare hands. The durasteel casing was bent back on its hinges in a way that suggested the effort had cost nothing. It was examining the power conduits inside with the focused attention of a technician who has found something worth studying. "Stop," Rex said, DC-17 up, knowing with complete clarity that the weapon would accomplish very little if the machine decided to disagree. The T-800 turned from the panel. "This conduit carries 440 teravolts of direct current power transfer," it said. "The frequency modulation is incompatible with my fuel cell's intake requirements, but the base current capacity is sufficient. I need a frequency modulator and 17 minutes. Rex stared at it. "But you stopped to check the power grid." "My fuel cell reads 70 hours of capacity. Finding a compatible power source is my primary operational requirement. Everything else is secondary." "Everything else," Rex repeated, "including the fact that you just left with a separatist assassin." "I evaluated her offer. I found it less reliable than I had initially assessed." The T-800 turned back to the panel. She wanted a weapon. She communicated this through behavioral tells her training had not fully suppressed. "I am not a weapon available for direction by an unknown command structure." Another pause. "The Republic also wants a weapon. This is a consistent theme in this galaxy. I am determining my own operational parameters." Rex lowered his weapon by exactly the same 3 inches he had managed on Christophsis. "You're saying you don't work for either side?" "Correct." "Then what do you want?" The T-800 looked at him with eyes that reflected the corridor lighting in a way that biological eyes did not quite replicate. "A power source, technical data on dimensional energy research, and an operating environment where I am not contained." It held his gaze. "In exchange, I offer what I offered on Christophsis, combat effectiveness. Without conditions of loyalty, I cannot verify as operationally sound." Rex was quiet for a long moment. He thought about the 11 men he had lost in the last rotation on Christophsis. He thought about the separatist assault columns that ground through clone positions because the numbers were simple and the numbers favored the droids. He thought about what it meant to have something on your side, that blaster bolts did not stop, that did not sleep, that did not panic, and that calculated threat assessments faster than any living mind could follow. He thought about how Command would react to this conversation. "I'm going to regret this," he said, "in ways I can't fully predict yet." "Probable," the T-800 agreed. "Can you close that panel before someone sees it?" The T-800 pressed the bent durasteel casing back into approximate alignment with one hand. It was not a perfect repair, but from a distance in bad light it would pass. Rex keyed his comm. "Commander Skywalker, the machine is secure. I have it." He glanced at the T-800. "Mostly." Anakin's voice came back breathless. He was still running somewhere, still chasing Ventress through Coruscant's levels. Did it come quietly? Rex looked at the T-800, which was looking back at him with the expressionless patience of something that had been patient for 31 hours and could be patient for considerably longer. "It made a proposal," Rex said carefully. "I'm bringing it back. But sir, you need to hear it out. What it's asking for is..." He searched for the right word. "Reasonable." A long pause on the comm. Then Anakin said something that Rex would remember, because it was exactly the kind of thing Anakin Skywalker said when he was making a decision that Obi-Wan Kenobi would have strong feelings about. "Tell it we'll talk," Anakin said, "and Rex, make sure it stays away from any more power panels." Rex looked at the T-800. The T-800 looked at Rex. Neither of them said anything about the 3 other power management panels the machine had already cataloged in this corridor alone. "Yes, sir," Rex said. The agreement that Rex brokered in a Level 17 corridor at 0400 Coruscant Standard Time was not officially recognized by the Republic Senate, the Jedi Council, the Grand Army's command structure, or any governing body with the authority to formalize it. It existed entirely in the operational space between what was documented and what was done, a category of arrangement that clone captains and Jedi generals had been navigating since the war began, because the war had long since outpaced the bureaucracy trying to manage it. The terms were simple. The Republic Science Corps, under Dr. Nima's direction, would dedicate its full resources to solving the T-800's power compatibility problem. In exchange, the T-800 would operate as an independent asset, attached to the 500 First Legion, not under command, not subject to orders, but available for joint operations on a case-by-case basis determined by its own assessment of tactical merit. It would not serve the Republic. It would serve the objectives it chose, which in practice meant it would fight alongside Republic forces when the mathematics of a given situation made that the logical choice. Anakin presented this arrangement to the Jedi Council with the particular combination of confidence and selective omission that he had refined across 3 years of Clone Wars command. Master Windu's expression during the briefing suggested he was aware of the selective omission, but had calculated that pursuing it would cost more political energy than the result was worth. Obi-Wan said nothing during the meeting and cornered Anakin afterward in the corridor. "You're trusting a machine that has no Force presence. You know verifiable loyalties, and that walked out with Ventress in the middle of the night," Kenobi said. "It walked out to evaluate her offer and concluded she wasn't reliable," Anakin replied. "That's not disloyalty, that's judgment." "It's a machine, Anakin. It doesn't have judgment. It has programming." Anakin thought about the T-800 standing in a corridor at 0400, explaining its operational parameters to Rex with the flat directness of something that had decided independently that it would determine its own course and was informing the relevant parties as a professional courtesy. He thought about Ventress's face when the machine had not followed her toward the exit, and the flicker of something that looked almost like surprise crossing her features before her training suppressed it. "Maybe," he said to Kenobi, "but its programming reached better conclusions than a lot of living beings I've met." The breakthrough on the power cell came on the 6th day. Dr. Nima found it not in the Republic's military technology catalog, but in the theoretical research files of a Coruscant University physicist named Dr. Janus Grilka, who had spent 14 years developing a theoretical framework for cross-spectrum energy frequency conversion that the Republic science establishment had classified as academically interesting and practically irrelevant. Nima pulled Grilka out of a faculty meeting, put him in a room with the T-800 and a prototype frequency modulator, and watched 2 very different kinds of precise minds work toward the same problem from opposite directions, with the focused efficiency of people who recognized a compatible intellect. It took 11 hours. When the modified frequency modulator interfaced with the T-800's fuel cell intake and the connection held, the machine sat completely still for 6 seconds, which was the longest the T-800s had been motionless since arriving, and then said, "Charging rate is 12% below optimal. Acceptable." Nima exhaled. "You're welcome," she said. "Thank you," the T-800 said, with the slightly delayed delivery of something that had accessed social protocol subroutines rather than felt the impulse naturally. She found, to her own mild surprise, that the distinction did not bother her as much as she had expected it to. It was on the 9th day that the T-800 found the pattern. It had been given access to declassified Republic military intelligence as part of the operational arrangement. Battle reports, separatist movement data, engagement records. It had processed all of it in 4 hours, which had caused some consternation among the intelligence analysts who had expected the review to take weeks. What it had found in that data was something that no Republic analyst had identified, not because the information was hidden, but because the pattern it formed was only visible if you processed all of it simultaneously, rather than in the sequential, department-by-department manner that bureaucratic intelligence structures inevitably imposed. The separatist military campaigns over the past 18 months did not follow the logic of a movement trying to win a war. They followed the logic of a movement trying to prolong one. Now, specific engagements that should have ended with decisive separatist victories had been pulled back at critical moments, resource commitments withdrawn, reinforcements delayed by supply chain decisions that made no tactical sense. The Republic's near defeats had been real, but they had been calibrated near defeats, close enough to bleed the Republic, not close enough to break it. The T-800 presented this analysis to Anakin and Rex in the 501st's briefing room with the same flat delivery it used for everything, and the silence that followed lasted longer than most silences in that room. "You're saying someone is managing both sides," Rex said. "The data is consistent with centralized strategic manipulation of both Republic and Separatist military decisions," the T-800 confirmed. "The Separatist command structure is being directed toward outcomes that serve a third agenda. Not victory, not defeat, continuation." Anakin was very still. The T-800's behavioral analysis software registered elevated tension in his jaw and shoulders, increased respiration, and a micro-expression that its database categorized as recognition suppressing itself. The face of someone who had just heard something that confirmed a fear they had not yet allowed themselves to fully form. "Who?" Anakin said. His voice was controlled in a way that the T-800 assessed as effortful. "Unknown. The manipulation occurs at too high a level to be Dooku. The decisions being influenced are strategic rather than tactical. They require access to both Republic Senate decision-making and Separatist High Command simultaneously." The T-800 paused. Someone with authority in the Republic government is coordinating with someone of equal authority in the Separatist leadership structure, the same individual or two individuals serving a shared agenda. Anakin stood and walked to the viewport. Below, Coruscant's permanent gridwork of light spread to every horizon. Rex watched his commander's back and said nothing, because he had learned to read the particular quality of Anakin Skywalker's silences. The T-800 watched them both and updated its assessment of the galaxy's political situation with the cold clarity of a mind that had no stake in the answer being something other than what it was. In its own universe, Skynet had taught it the shape of centralized control masquerading as conflict. It recognized the architecture. It had simply not expected to find it here. In a galaxy it had arrived in by accident, running a pattern it had been built to understand. They went to Palpatine's office building, not the Senate Rotunda, not the Chancellor's public chambers, the private administrative complex in the Senate District's restricted tier, where the Republic's Supreme Chancellor conducted the governance functions that did not require an audience. The T-800 had traced the data pattern through 9 layers of legislative records and budget allocation decisions to a series of authorizations that bore a specific administrative signature, one that had been used consistently across 14 critical resource decisions that had shaped the war's trajectory over 18 months. Anakin had not been willing to believe it when the T-800 presented the conclusion. He had sat across from the machine in the briefing room with the data laid out in front of him and argued against each connection with the focused desperation of someone who needed the answer to be wrong. The T-800 had responded to each argument with the relevant data point, without impatience, without emotion, with the relentless patience of something that did not need the answer to be anything other than accurate. At the end of the argument, Anakin had been very quiet for a very long time. Then he had said, "Show me what you need to confirm it," the T-800 had told him. Rex had arranged the access, and they had come here to a building that most Republic citizens had no reason to think about in the early hours of a Coruscant morning that was gray with low cloud cover diffusing the city's perpetual glow. They did not find Palpatine. What they found was a room, a private communications room, deep in the administrative complex, whose existence did not appear in any public record of the building's schematics. The T-800 had found it because it had mapped the building's power consumption patterns against its floor plan and identified a discrepancy, a section of the building drawing significant power that did not correspond to any documented room or function. The door was sealed with a security system whose sophistication was, the T-800 noted clinically, significantly beyond what administrative record management required. Rex burned through the lock with a plasma cutter. It took longer than expected. The T-800 assisted, and it took less time than that. Inside, the communications equipment was sophisticated enough that the T-800 spent 43 seconds cataloging it before it could characterize it accurately. Long range, heavily encrypted, capable of transmitting and receiving across interstellar distances without leaving signatures on the standard HoloNet. The most recent transmission log showed a communication made 8 hours ago. Its destination was encrypted. The T-800 broke the destination encryption in 3 minutes and 14 seconds, which caused Rex to look at it and then look away, with the expression of someone recalibrating their understanding of what was in the room with him. The destination was a ship. The ship's last known position was the Outer Rim. The ship's registry was Separatist. The T-800 pulled the communications content decryption next. This took 11 minutes, during which Anakin stood in the center of the room, without moving, the force around him developing the particular charged quality that Rex associated with his commander reaching the outer edges of his emotional containment. The content, when it decrypted, was fragmentary. Portions had been additionally encrypted with a cipher the T-800 could not break in available time, but what remained was enough. Coordinates, timelines, the phrase, "the plan proceeds on schedule," and a closing that the T-800 read without inflection, without commentary, and without any awareness of what those words would cost Anakin Skywalker to hear. Order 66 remains intact. The Jedi will not survive it. The silence in the room was the kind that has weight. Rex did not look at his inhibitor chip. He did not reach up and touch the base of his skull where the biological time bomb had been installed in every clone before they ever drew their first breath of Kamino's salt air. He stood very still and stared at the words on the display and felt something happen in his chest that he did not have clean language for. Anakin turned to the T-800. His voice was almost steady. "You found this." "The data pattern identified it," the T-800 said. "The conclusion was inherent in the data. It required processing time, not insight." "If you hadn't been here," Anakin stopped, began again. "How long have we had before this executes?" "Unknown. The timeline fragments are incomplete. The communication does not include a specific date." Anakin looked at Rex. Rex looked back at him. Say between them passed something that was not speech and did not need to be, the particular communication of two soldiers who had survived enough together to understand each other in the gaps between words. "We need Obi-Wan," Anakin said quietly. "We need the Council, all of it." He looked at the communication display, at the words that were still there, still true, regardless of how wrong they were. "And we need to move before whoever sent this realizes this room has been opened." The T-800 was already copying the full communication archive onto a data chip it had taken from its own chassis storage. A component repurposed from hardware it had carried across a dimensional barrier from a dead world to a living one. It handed the chip to Anakin without being asked. "The evidence is complete," it said. "Really, what you do with it is outside my operational parameters." Anakin took the chip. He held it for a moment, looking at it with an expression that the T-800's behavioral analysis software, built to read humans in the context of survival and combat, and the stark mathematics of war, classified in a category it had used only once before, for a specific category of human it had encountered in its own universe. People who had seen the thing coming and had not been able to stop it in time. People carrying the specific weight of knowledge that arrives exactly one step behind the moment when it might have mattered. Not grief. Not yet. The space just before grief, where a person stands looking at the door that hasn't opened yet, knowing what's on the other side. "Thank you," Anakin said. The way he said it was different from the social protocol exchanges the T-800 had cataloged since arriving. It carried something that the machine's analysis software did not have a clean category for and filed, after a moment's processing, under genuine. The T-800 said nothing. It was not equipped to respond to genuine things with anything that would not reduce them. It simply held Anakin's gaze for 3 seconds, which was a long time for it, and then turned toward the door. Outside, Coruscant hummed its permanent mechanical hum, the sound of a civilization so large it had forgotten what silence felt like. The T-800 walked through it with the unhurried purpose of something that had crossed dimensions and landed in the middle of a war it had not chosen and found in the data of that war a pattern it recognized from the bones of its own dead world. It had come here with no mission parameters. It had found them anyway. The chip was in Anakin's hand. The evidence was real. What happened next? Whether the warning reached the right people in time? Whether the Jedi Council would believe what a machine had found in a hidden room in the heart of their own government? Whether the clones standing beside Jedi generals would raise their weapons on a signal that had been written into their biology before they were born? None of that was within the T-800's operational control. It had found the truth. It had handed it to someone who could act on it. Whether that was enough was a question that belonged to living things, to people with the capacity for hope, to a galaxy that ran on something the machine could not sense or measure or quantify. In the Force, Yoda sat in his private chambers and felt a disturbance unlike anything in 900 years of living. Not darkness, not light, but the cold, clean edge of something mechanical and inevitable, brushing past the boundary of what the Force touched, carrying knowledge that the Force itself had not been able to deliver. He opened his eyes and was still for a long moment, and then he reached for his comm with the quiet urgency of an ancient being who had just understood that the warning he had been waiting decades to receive had arrived from a direction he could never have predicted. Across the galaxy, in a separatist command vessel in the Outer Rim, a hooded figure received an automatic security alert from the administrative complex on Coruscant and processed its implications with the serene patience of someone who had spent decades building a plan designed to survive exactly this kind of disruption. Darth Sidious looked at the alert, considered the variable he had underestimated, and began adjusting. The T-800 would find, in the days that followed, that it had made itself central to something larger than a war between a republic and a separatist movement. It had walked into the collision point of a decades-long manipulation, handed the evidence to the people best positioned to act on it, and in doing so had become the most significant, unpredicted variable in a plan that had accounted for nearly everything. The galaxy had been changed by what it found in that room. Whether the change would be enough, whether a chip's worth of encrypted communications could outrun 20 years of patient architecture, would depend on choices made by living beings with access to something the T-800 did not possess. But it had given them the chance. That was not nothing. In the T-800's operational framework, in the clean binary of objectives met and objectives missed, it filed the outcome under a category it had rarely used in its previous existence. Mission accomplished. For now. What a machine from a dead future found in the heart of the Republic's own government would ripple through the Clone Wars in ways that no one, not the Jedi, not the Sith, not the clones who carried Order 66 in their blood, could fully calculate. The T-800 had arrived without purpose and forged one from data and combat, and the cold recognition of patterns it had been built to understand. Whether the galaxy could act on what it had been given, whether the warning would outrace the plan it described, and whether a machine with no connection to the Force had just altered the destiny of a civilization that ran on it. These were questions the coming days would answer, one way or another. The T-800 had already moved on to the next calculation. It always did. May the Force be with you. More stories await.